watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and joining us from Washington, D.C. is Salih Hudayar. He's the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile and also the founder of the East Turkestan Awakening Movement. Mr. Hudayar, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Just wanted to get into the latest, that is, the government in exile has filed uh, at the International Criminal Court in The Hague a case against top Chinese leaders, including Xi Jinping, for genocide, for crimes against humanity, against the Turkic people, against the Uyghurs, the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz in East Turkestan, which the Chinese call Xinjiang. Now, of course, we do know that China is not a party to the Rome Statute, but I think the legal argument that you're basing your case on is that two other countries, that is Cambodia and I think it's Tajikistan, are party, and there have been large-scale or alleged large-scale deportations of Turkic people from there to China. Is that correct?
Yes, Cambodia deported over 20 Uyghurs several years ago back to East Turkestan, whereas Tajikistan has routinely deported Uyghurs over the past decades back to East Turkestan. And a lot of our people actually have fled, East Turkestan through Tajikistan to other places in Central Asia, and even made it. Some have luckily made it into Turkey and parts of Europe as well. So, because the atrocities, although it is taking place in East Turkestan, there are member states of the ICC that are in a way complicit in the atrocities, therefore giving the ICC jurisdiction to look at our case, just like how they established jurisdiction over the conditions of the genocide of the Rohingya via Bangladesh.
So you're saying there's a precedent there. Just to get or give our viewers more of a sense of what's happening in East Turkestan, Chinese, as we're saying, the more popular or the more known geographical term is Xinjiang. We spoke, I think, about maybe 2 months back to Dr. Adrian Zenz, who had come out with a report, and I think Associated Press had also put out that report. And he called the situation in the area over the years, and especially now, demographic genocide. How do you describe what the situation is?
It's more than just a demographic genocide. It's a full-blown genocide. This is something that hasn't been that has been happening for a long time. Actually, it's not something recent. Since China invaded and occupied East Turkestan, it has been waging a brutal campaign of colonization, genocide, and occupation. According to some of the things that we submitted, evidence that we submitted to the ICC, is in the initial 5 years of Chinese occupation of East Turkestan, the government itself claimed that it eliminated over 150,000 enemies of China in East Turkestan. You had between 1964 to 1996, 46 nuclear testings, which according to some researchers have killed anywhere from 190,000 upwards of 750,000 people, leaving millions of other people, who were exposed to radiation, developing cancerous diseases. The Chinese government itself claims that between 1989 and 2009, they've eliminated, that they've prevented, quote, the illegal births of 3.7 million babies, forced abortion. Right now, in the conditions, you have sterilization. Over the years, numerous peaceful demonstrations have been brutally crushed by the Chinese government, which resulted in massacres. We had testimonies of former PLA soldiers testifying about how they participated in certain ethnic cleansing campaigns where they would wipe out the entire Uyghur villages, women and children included. All of this is genocide. in the camps. There have been a lot of reports about the concentration camps. Uh, Back in 2019, in one specific camp alone, over a period of 6 months, over 150 people had died due to various reasons, including torture, to forced starvation, and other means. All which is deliberately conducted by the Chinese government to you know. Uh, essentially target our community to wipe out our people in the long run.
The Chinese government, of course, says it dealing with it's a counter-terrorism and what is it called? It re-education camps. Those are what they're called. But like you're saying, since it has been continuing since 1949, do you think that the world is sitting up and noticing a little bit more now because of the spotlight being on China, because of its behavior externally, say even with India in South China Sea, in the East China Sea, in Bhutan, whether it's on different fronts, trade, economic, espionage, that the internal microscope is a little bit more, would you say, on China now?
Yes, I think now that the international community is beginning to realize what or who China really is, they're paying more attention to the atrocities that are happening in East Turkestan and Tibet and elsewhere. Previously, governments knew about this. I mean, they were totally aware of what was going on in East Turkestan, but it just didn't serve their interest at the time because they wanted to maintain a good relationship with China, develop economic ties and so forth. Um, Most countries in Europe are awakening to this. India is awakening to this. The U.S., Canada, Australia have awakened to this, but there are Muslim majority countries that have unfortunately they know exactly what's going on, but they are in a state of denial, denying that these atrocities are happening or completely turning a blind eye to it. Again, due to their close relationship with China.
So, would you say whether it's the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Iran, more importantly, Turkey, because the community is involved from there as well, or at least origin is Turkic. Pakistan, where the foreign minister went to Hainan recently for a strategic dialogue with his counterpart and basically backed the Chinese position on what they call Xinjiang. Are those countries burying their head in the sand? Are they turning a blind eye because they're being bought over?
Unfortunately, that's the case. The OIC, I mean, they've raised the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. They've raised every
Yeah.
issue, every Muslim group out there. But when it comes to the situation of Uyghur and other Turkic Muslims in East Turkestan, they've completely buried their head in the sand. Pakistan, they know very well what's going on. In fact, dozens of Pakistani men who married Uyghur women, their wives were sent to concentration camps. And so the Pakistani government knows this very well. In fact, they had a lot of headaches as a result of this, but again, they completely ignored it because for them, they need Chinese money. It's much more important than raising the issue of Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims being killed. Um, Turkey, another issue. Turkey, as you mentioned, is a Turkic state. We have long historical, cultural, and linguistic ties that bond us together. In fact, the Turks originated from East Turkestan before they moved to Anatolia over 1,000 years ago. However, the Turkish government, especially under the Erdogan administration or regime, has completely buried its head in the sand. In fact, just yesterday, 18 Uyghurs were prevented from entering Ankara, which is Turkey's capital, to hold a press conference about their family members who were in concentration camps and prisons. The Turkish government has prevented our people from even going out into the streets to protest China, engage in peaceful activism. The Turkish government claims that it promised it would give citizenship to our population living there, which still hasn't happened. Currently, over 1,092 Uyghurs are detained by the Turkish government and just sitting in limbo in detention facilities. And all these people were requested by China to be extradited back to East Turkestan. However, Turkey hasn't done that, but they're just using them, as a trump card, just to use them when the time comes, a negotiation card with China. So all these Muslim countries are ultimately just turning a blind eye because they want Chinese money.
Well, the US has enacted and President Trump has signed into law the Uyghur Act. How much of a boost is that in terms of specifically targeting Chinese individuals, officials? And what would you like India to do? Because India has also been playing safe when it comes to what it calls internal issues, whether it's Tibet, whether it's Hong Kong, even Taiwan, when it comes to China. The ambassador did raise the issue in The Hague on Hong Kong. But how would you want India to respond?
So, as far as after the signing of the Uyghur Act, and more specifically after we submitted our petition to the ICC, the U.S. government, they sanctioned several Chinese officials, four of which we had submitted to the ICC, and then a couple of weeks later, they also sanctioned the Bingtuan, which is actually the most crucial Chinese entity. That is involved in these mass atrocities. The Bingtuan is a 3.5 million size strong paramilitary force which runs these concentration camps, prisons, and labor camps across East Turkestan, while also keeping quote internal stability end quote. India, we would like India to do to offer support to East Turkestan in at least the same ways that they offer support to the Tibetan community, to the Tibetan government in exile, for example. That's what our people expect from India. We have a long and historical ties with India in terms of cultural and economic exchanges, and this is something that that goes thousands of years. More recently, post 1949, India has a very unique position in terms of East Turkestan post 1949. India was the first country to open its doors and its arms to us when we were fleeing Chinese occupation. Unfortunately, many of our people since then moved on to Turkey, which we now think was a disastrous mistake. We should have stayed put in India, given that it was our neighbor. So offering, refuge to Uyghur and other Turkic peoples who are fleeing Chinese oppression is another thing that we expect from India. And raising the issue internationally at forums like the UN and other places is also another thing which we expect from India.
I seen you do follow a lot of the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, and I think even your DP on various social media profiles quotes him a lot. And it's a non-violent movement, as you stated. It's a democratic elected movement as well, a government in exile that you call it. What is your stand versus, how do you keep, say, the youth who have seen nothing really changing or don't see anything changing unless they take up arms? What is your message to them? There is, of course, the ETIM that has been sanctioned by the UN as well.
So the ETIM, just to make a clarification, the so-called East Turkestan Islamic movement was actually fabricated by China on November 12th, 2001. Prior to that, there was no mention of this group. China, after 9/11, claimed that it was a victim of, quote, East Turkestani terrorism, end quote. And they selected our Independence Day, the independence of the former East Turkestan republics, as the day to raise the issue of the ETIM at the UN Security Council back in 2001. And by doing so, China portrayed the broad East Turkestan independence movement, which also happens to correlate with, the acronyms happens to correlate with ETIM, and to confuse the world to think that, East Turkestan people are terrorists. Um, there have been incidents, as you mentioned, the youth are getting fed up by, silence, both from external and internal within our own community. However, at this point, responding in terms of violence without, actual external support is going to only justify China's campaign, um, until the international community, recognizes the fact that we are an occupied country and that the atrocities are genocide. For our people to engage in any act of violence would only help justify China's claims of fighting against, um, terrorism or extremism or separatism, etc. Um, Ideally, we would want this, we would want to regain our independence and free our people through peaceful means, because by no means, nobody wants war, because war causes deaths and suffering, a lot of casualties. But at this point, our people, we have, we're just looking for external support, because if we don't get any help, if we don't
Sorry.
we're going to be wiped out. And previously, in the 1940s, it was the Soviets who had supported us initially against the Chinese nationalist regime at that time, and when we declared independence. And initially, we tried peacefully as well, which didn't work out, and so it led to an armed rebellion with Soviet support, and we were able to maintain our independence for a few years.
You're talking about external support. You're talking about the international community recognizing the occupation. You say you're a government in exile, a democratic government in exile. How much have you moved towards any kind of recognition from international government, from governments, from international organizations?
So as far as right now, the East Turkestan government in exile was formed in Washington D.C. in 2004. We were formed quite a bit late compared to the Tibetan government in exile, due to various intricacies. I mean, our leaders, our initial leaders of our government, were actually killed in a plane crash, so-called plane crash. But we believe they had been executed in 1949 before the Chinese communists invaded. Since after that, a few of our leaders were established, organizations in the Soviet Union. Some of them were trying to establish a government in exile. However, I don't think the Soviets allowed that. In Turkey, we tried to do this as well, but the Turkish government didn't allow it. And so finally, in 2004, we were able to establish, once our movement actually came out of Central Asia, came out of Turkey, because we tried both these areas thinking that we would receive, some solidarity, which never happened. So instead, we decided to try the West, like the United States and Europe, and we were able to be successful in that. However, right now, no government officially recognizes the East Turkestan government in exile, because it would go against China's so-called One China policy, which many countries that is engage in diplomatic relations with China have to, in a kind of way, adhere to. However, governments, as right now, I think the international community is slowly becoming more aware of the historical, revisionist history that China has put out. The fact that, Turkestan, Tibet, and other parts, including Mongolia, were occupied by China. So I think in the coming years, I think governments around the world, including international organizations, will ultimately recognize, East Turkestan as an occupied country, therefore recognizing the government in exile as the legitimate government.
Salih Hudayar, we appreciate your time, giving us your time from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us on StratNews Global.
Thank you for having me.
And you can get all the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective on our website. And if you like videos like this one, don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel and to support our kind of journalism on our website. Watching StratNews Global, I'm Amitabh Revi.